Alright, so hi and good day. In line with the requirements for Science Research 1, I am here to present my research proposal study entitled Lyrification Mnemonics Enhanced Teaching Technique for Improved Memorization and Retention Among General Academic Strand Grade 11 Biological Science Student. Now to begin with, here is the rationale. For the rationale, we have here PISA DepEd Assessment Report in 2018 about academic performance of students in science, DepEd Memorandum Number 35 Series of 2016, current science curriculum for junior high and senior high school, student-centered teaching and learning approach, memorization skill, 5 categories of mnemonic devices that are used in the field of teaching, Joel Levin's verbal imagery associative mnemonic technique, Yo, Feller, and Crowther rhythmic and melodic mnemonics. On the recent study conducted by PISA DepEd Student Assessment in 2018, scientific literacy of Filipino students was on 353 points for boys and 359 points for girls, which is significantly lower than the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development average scale of 489 points. The PISA 2018 results reflect the needs and urgency for improving the quality of teaching strategies, approaches, and techniques to lift the academic literacy and proficiency from the basic means of knowledge acquisition to higher knowledge acquisition. To mitigate and improve the lowest ranking of the Philippine education among 79 countries, there are provisions and initiatives raised by DepEd in basic curriculum, particularly on teaching programs. According to the Department of Education, DepEd Order 35 Series of 2016, which is all about the Learning Action Cell as K-12 Basic Education Program, School-Based Continuing Professional Development Strategy for Improvement of Teaching and Learning, teachers are subjected to conduct collaborative learning sessions to solve shared challenges encountered in school. Such challenges may include learner diversity, student inclusion, and variation and improvement in content and teaching pedagogy. With regards to that, DepEd urges teachers to have mastery with the use of newly generated teaching techniques based on the assessment of the learning preference of students. Digital and technological-based instructions are the trend in teaching pedagogy. However, conventional teaching techniques were also reformed through enhancing its modality. One of these conventional techniques is the use of mnemonics integration in teaching. One of the basic means of knowledge that influence learning is memorization. It is based on the idea that individual learning is influenced by both internal and external factors stated in John Piaget's cognitive learning theory. Students' ability to process factual and complex information depends on the processing skill of recognizing ideas present on the text or material. In order to retain and recall the information that an individual student had acquired from previous studies, most are making self-centered mnemonics. Mnemonic device or memory device is any learning technique that aids information retention as well as human recall or memory retrieval. And one of these mnemonic aids is music and rhymes that makes memorization easier by converting short-term memory to long-term memory and sensory memory. We also have here 5 categories of mnemonic devices that are used in field of teaching. Amir Yosefi 2011 classified mnemonics and mnemonic devices into 5 categories that are used in the field of teaching, such as linguistic, spatial, visual, physical response, and verbal methods. In line with that, we have here the Joel Levin's verbal imagery associative mnemonic technique. Components of associative mnemonic technique is highlighted by 3R concept theory, which is recoding, relating, and retrieving. Levin claimed that students learn efficiently through verbal imagery associative mnemonic technique rather than other mnemonic technique. In contrast to that, Feller, Yo, and Crowther believe that musical mnemonics has 3 components which are modeling, repetition, and cueing. In a study conducted by Yo in 2012, she found out the effectiveness of musical mnemonics in teaching biology through concepts of Krebs cycle. The study proved that students were able to achieve the learning objectives because the audible musical mnemonics enabled them to consolidate their memory processes. Another study about musical mnemonic integration in teaching is proved by Crowther in 2018, as he studied the effectiveness of songwriting into relevant scientific concepts, where he is able to figure out the extent of songwriting to help students create practice-linked scientific identities. Therefore, the researcher gathered enough information and would like to conduct this study entitled Lyrification Mnemonics Enhanced Teaching Technique for Improved Memorization and Retention Among General Academic Grade 11 biological science students, with the aim of assessing lyrification mnemonics as teaching technique that will measure the memorization and retention skill of grade 11 students. This study will also look for significant difference between lyrification mnemonic and visual imagery mnemonic teaching technique on comprehension and scientific literacy of students in terms of memorization, reproduction, and retention among senior high school students. For the theoretical framework, we have here visual auditory kinesthetic learning theory, VAC theory proposed by Fleming, social learning theory by Albert Bandura, musical mnemonic studies and literature theory, John Levin's components of verbal imagery associative mnemonic technique, Yo Feller and Crowther's components of rhythmic and melodic mnemonics. For the research paradigm, we use the IVDV model, which is independent variables and dependent variables. So for the independent variables, we have here, number 1, profile of the respondents in terms of mnemonic preference and learning style. Number 2, we have cognitive teaching technique or the strategy, which are verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique and musical mnemonic teaching technique. We also have here verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique components, which are remembering, relating, and retrieving. On the other hand, we have here musical mnemonic teaching technique components, which are modeling, repetition, and cueing. And then for the last one, we have pre-test and post-test evaluation of verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique and lyrification mnemonic teaching technique. For the dependent variables, we have here comprehension and scientific literacy of students in terms of memorization, reproduction, and retention. For the statement of the problem, number 1, what is the profile of the respondents in terms of mnemonic preference and learning style? Number 2, what is the pre-test and post-test of the respondents under verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique? Number 3, what is the pre-test and post-test of the respondents under lyrification mnemonic teaching technique? Number 4, is there a significant difference between the pre-test and post-test of the respondents using verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique in memorization skills in terms of A. Spatial remembering, B. Relating, C. Reconstruction. Number 5, is there a significant difference between the pre-test and post-test of the respondents under lyrification mnemonic teaching technique in memorization skills in terms of modeling, repetition, and cueing? Is there a significant difference between the pre-test and post-test of the respondents under the two mnemonic teaching techniques, including verbal imagery mnemonic teaching technique and lyrification mnemonic technique? For the methodology, the research design used in the study is quantitative research. This study is also experimental in nature, where it strictly adheres to scientific research design. It includes hypotheses, a variable that can be manipulated by the researcher, and variables that can be measured, calculated, and compared. Most importantly, experimental research is completed using experimental and control group under controlled environment. And then the researcher collects data and results with either support or reject the research hypothesis. This method of research is also referred to as hypothesis testing or deductive research method. For the population of the study, the researcher will select a total of 45 students known to use or experience both musical mnemonics and visual imagery mnemonics in academic subjects, particularly in general biology. The chosen participants were expected to be currently enrolled at the School of Felix Amante National High School Senior High School during the academic year 2020-2021, and then the participants are exclusively and purposively chosen from grade 11 under general academic strand who are taking general biology on the second semester of the academic year. And then the chosen participants will undergo academic exposure using the two mnemonic techniques and later be subjected to a pre-test and post-test assessment to be able to gather important information that would be very useful in making concrete application and strengthen the study. For the research instrument that will be used in this study were consisted of 3 parts. The first part of the research instrument will be consisted of questionnaire intended to gather respondents' profile in terms of mnemonic preference and learning style. This will be essential to the study as researchers hope to use purposive sampling in gathering respondents of the study. The second part of the research instrument is consisted of pre-test questions in line with the lessons to be tackled for a month. This instrument will measure the initial understanding of respondents regarding the subject matter. This will also be utilized in order to gather their previous learning as early scale of retrieval of knowledge based on their previous understanding. The third part of the research instrument is post-test question, intended to measure their progress as the researcher exposed the two groups under their respective mnemonic teaching technique. For the statistical treatment or data analysis, this study will utilize the use of t-test. This statistical treatment is used to compare the means of two groups. Since we are using hypothesis testing, t-test will help this study to determine whether a process or treatment actually has an effect on the population of interest or whether the two groups are different from each other. T-test will be significant to this study since the nature of the study is experimental, where it uses inferential statistics. This treatment will be used to determine whether there is a significant difference between the means of the two groups. This test statistic produces t-value, which are extension of z-scores, where it represents how many standard units the means of the two groups are apart. Alright, so that would be all. So thank you very much for listening.